I'm genuinely honoured today to be opening this debate on behalf of His Majesty's loyal opposition on the subject of Armed Forces Day. I had the honour to be present in New Palace Yard on Monday to watch members of the Armed Forces raise the Armed Forces flag in Parliament at a ceremony presided over by Mr Speaker and his chaplain, the Reverend Canon Mark Birch, MBO. It was a joyous occasion, and I'm pleased to say it was very well attended by many MPs. My opposite number, the Armed Forces Minister, is the proud son of a submariner, while he's being followed by the equally proud son of Stoker First Class Reginald Francois, who was on a minesweeper called HMS Bresset on D-Day. So we are both naval brats, as he put it, at least after a fashion. It's now become established that Armed Forces Day is held on the last Saturday each June. So this Saturday there will be many ceremonies taking place in parallel across the length and breadth of the United Kingdom, including in my own county of Essex, and I'm hoping to attend the celebration in Basildon, the town in which I grew up. This is a time when people across our four nations come together to celebrate the role of the whole Armed Forces family, regulars, reserves, veterans, cadets, and of course their loved ones, in defending our country and our democratic way of life. I hope to say something about these four categories, regulars, reserves, cadets and veterans, in my remarks this afternoon. Beginning with reserves. Armed Forces Day, and indeed Armed Forces Week, is a matter which normally enjoys bipartisan, or perhaps I should say tripartisan, support in Parliament. Touching on this also allows me to say a bit about the value of reserves in our armed forces. In so doing, I declare an interest as someone who served as an infantry officer in the 5th Battalion of the Royal Anglian Regiment in the Territorial Army in the 1980s during the Cold War, when, and this dates me, the Berlin Wall was still up. As such, I greatly appreciate the extremely important role that our reserves from the Royal Naval Reserve, the Army Reserve, the Royal Auxiliary Air Force, the RAF Volunteer Reserve, and others play in supporting our regulars in the defence of the realm. In that context, I recently saw an analysis, Mr Deputy Speaker, which pointed out that following the 2024 general election, there were now 17 Conservative MPs in the House of Commons who had served or are serving in either the regular or reserved armed forces of the Crown. However, on these benches we have no monopoly of military service. The same survey also pointed out, quite rightfully, that Labour have 13 MPs in a similar position and the Liberal Democrats now have 8. For completeness, I must of course point out that the Honourable Member for Strangford also served in the Territorial Army, so he is with us on that point. Indeed, Mr Deputy Speaker, I sometimes feel that he is always with us. Indeed, he is virtually omnipresent in the chamber. It's therefore true to say that armed forces have support across the political spectrum, at least from those of us who are here. I merely note in passing that yet again, when defence is being discussed in this chamber, there is no Reform MP present to grace our proceedings. Ironically, for a party that likes to try and wrap itself in the flag, which it does not own, it is telling that they can't be bothered to turn up to debate the service of those who loyally serve under it. Bluntly, reform don't do defence. Nevertheless, I hope that most of what I say in the next few minutes will be broadly consensual, although with perhaps one exception, which I'll come to nearer the end. The role of our armed forces who've defended our way of life down the centuries is just as pertinent today as it has ever been. With the war in Ukraine, as the brave Ukrainians continue to resist Vladimir Putin's barbaric and illegal invasion of their country, taking place alongside continued turmoil in the Middle East. On regulars, those who serve in our armed forces deserve our unstinting and ongoing support. For the record, numerous studies show that the vast majority of people who serve in the armed forces benefit greatly from the experience. As well as serving their country, they often learn valuable skills or trades which make them highly marketable in the civilian job market. Indeed, this is a problem for retention, as the Minister was intimating. When I served as an MOD minister, albeit over a decade ago, I remember one powerful statistic, which was that 80% of people who left the armed forces normally found a job within 6 months. And I believe the figures are equally as good or even better today. People who are smart, disciplined, trained to turn up on time and to be resourceful are always likely to prove attractive to employers.
Will you give way?
I will on that point.
Thank you, Right Honourable Member, for giving way. Veterans play an important part in my constituency, Glastonbury and Somerton, with 11% of households home to at least one. However, female veterans are over 10% less likely to be employed compared to men. So does the Right Honourable Member agree with me that we must put more support into helping female veterans find the right employment after service?
Francois.
I agree. I think we should do everything we can to enable all veterans of whatever gender to find good employment after their service, but that certainly includes female veterans too. And forgive me, I cannot resist, Mr Deputy Speaker, but as Glastonbury is in her constituency, why on earth are kneecap being allowed to appear there? Why on earth have the organisers allowed that to take place? Now, moving on. We need to bear in mind that without point of order, yeah, sir.
If I could just correct the Right Honourable Member, the Glastonbury Festival site is not in my constituency.
I'm sorry, she mentioned Glastonbury, but if technically
No,
it's just over
hang
the
on a
line,
minute.
I'm sorry, sir.
It's not a point of order for the Chair, but I think it's helpful to have the record corrected. Francois.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. We need to bear this employability very much in mind, as without skilled regular personnel to maintain and operate even the most expensive and sophisticated kit, from Typhoon and F-35 fighters through Type 45 destroyers to main battle tanks, we cannot achieve operational success. In short, without well-trained people, the equipment counts for nothing and therefore does not achieve the deterrent effect that we seek. Indeed, when asked at RUSI earlier this week what was the single biggest challenge the Royal Navy is now facing, the Fleet Commander, Vice Admiral Andrew Burns, replied, and I quote him, "It's people right now. It's the quantity of people, and it's not just recruitment, it's retention." For context, this is not a uniquely British problem. All of our Five Eyes partners are facing similar challenges, even the United States, and I shall return to this in a moment or two. Moving on now to cadets. We're very fortunate in this country to have an active and enthusiastic cadet movement, and we welcome the proposals in the White Paper to expand the cadets even further, although we would like to see more detail of how exactly this is going to be achieved. Cadet units play a vital role in fostering disciplined teamwork and a sense of service among young people, providing invaluable opportunities for personal development and serving as a pathway, should they so desire it, for future careers in the armed forces. Mr Deputy Speaker, we are all ultimately, whether we be ministers, shadow ministers or otherwise, constituency MPs. So in that context, I should like to pay particular tribute to the Army Cadet detachments in both Rayleigh and Wickford, who are part of C Company within the Essex Army Cadet Force, and both of whom I visited in the past, although I'm hoping to see the Rayleigh detachment again shortly, not least as it appears they'll need to find a new home within the next several years. I should also like to highlight the valuable work undertaken by 1474 Wickford Squadron of the Air Training Corps, and indeed their sister unit 1476 Rayleigh Squadron Air Training Corps, about whom I should declare an interest to the Minister, as I have the honour to have recently been appointed as their honorary squadron president. Their motto is Amanagawa, which is Japanese for Heavenly River, and I can confirm that they are in full flow. I've heard a number of honourable members in the chamber over the years pay fulsome tribute to their cadet units, and I will chance my arm, Mr Deputy Speaker, so far as to say I'm sure we will rightfully hear praise for more cadet units before this debate is out. They are a fundamentally important part of the armed forces family, and as well as the young people who sign up, I should also like to take this opportunity to thank those adults who give of their time voluntarily in order to provide instruction and leadership for these outstanding young people. Turning to veterans. As one example of work that can be done to protect them, I would like to commend to the House an initiative known as the Forcer Protocol. This idea is named after Alan Forcer, who served in the British Army for a number of years in several theatres, but who sadly took his own life after a struggle with complex PTSD. His widow, Claire Lilly, came to see me at my constituency surgery a number of years ago now and told me she was determined to channel her grief in a positive way by establishing a system to help find and protect veterans who go missing. When I met Claire, I was struck by her absolute determination to succeed, and I'm pleased to tell the House that is exactly what she did. In short, the Forcer Protocol is now a standard operating procedure among many police forces, similar in some ways to the Herbert Protocol for people who go missing with dementia, but with special features designed specifically to assist former service personnel. In essence, it works like this. People who have a veteran in their family who they believe may be vulnerable can register their details confidentially, including known associates and favourite haunts, with an organisation known as Safe and Found Online. In the event that a veteran then goes missing, the family, via releasing a PIN code, can make that information immediately available to the police to assist them in their search for the potentially vulnerable veteran. The initiative was initially trialled by Greater Manchester Police over a 6-month period. The trial was an outstanding success, and GMP reported that the trial had allowed them to make positive and timely interventions which undoubtedly saved the lives of dozens of veterans within the Greater Manchester area. As a result of this highly successful trial, the Forcer Protocol is now being rolled out across police forces nationwide. We had an event to encourage progress in the Commons in November 2024, and I'm pleased to tell the House that, at very short notice, the new Veterans Minister, the Honourable and Gallant Member for Birmingham Sellyoak, attended to give his personal support, for which I'd like to thank him again today. In an equally bipartisan spirit, I'd like to pay tribute to the actor and TV celebrity Mr. Ross Kemp, aka Grant Mitchell, for his unwavering support for this initiative and for the work that he has done for veterans more widely, and indeed for his amazing documentary with the Royal Anglians, my old regiment, in Afghanistan. Thank you, Ross, for everything you do for our armed forces, past and present. We know your heart is absolutely in it, and we're grateful. I'm delighted to report to the House that my own constabulary in Essex are formally adopting the Forcer Protocol today at a ceremony at Colchester, deliberately in Armed Forces Week. This will mark 13 forces, now including Essex, that are using this life-saving procedure, and it is estimated that since the initial trial with GMP and now the rollout across other forces in this country, literally hundreds of lives of veterans have been saved by this process. For the record, I wish to commend Claire Lilly for everything that she and the loyal band of her supporters have done to make this possible. We have another event in the Commons this November, by which time I very much hope that all the 43 police forces in England and Wales will be fully signed up. Well done, Claire. Alan will be proud of it. As I mentioned earlier, despite the tripartisan nature of this debate, there is, I'm afraid, one issue on which I feel that the government and these benches will not agree, and that is in respect of the government's proposed treatment of Northern Ireland veterans. Over 300,000 regular British soldiers served in Northern Ireland during the Troubles between 1969 and 2007. This highly challenging task, known as Operation Banner, was one of the longest-running continual exercises in the entire history of the British Army. During this long and at times highly dangerous deployment, over 700 British soldiers were killed, assisting the Ulster Defence Regiment and the then Royal Ulster Constabulary, GC, now the PSNI, to uphold the rule of law in Northern Ireland. Many thousands of soldiers were maimed for life, by both Republican and so-called loyalist bombs, whilst trying to hold the line in an incredibly complex and dangerous situation. I've seen many memorials in my time, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Perhaps one of the most poignant was actually the Royal Ulster Constabulary Memorial at their headquarters at Knock, which commemorated the lives of hundreds of officers who also gave their lives working alongside the army to attempt to uphold the rule of law in Northern Ireland. Imagine then the utter dismay of those veterans who served in the British Army in that highly complex theatre at the news that the present Labour government intends to drive through a remedial order under the auspices of the Human Rights Act 1998, effectively to remove key provisions within the Conservative-inspired Northern Ireland Legacy Troubles and Reconciliation Act 2023. The net of this will have two very important effects. Firstly, it will reopen the endless cycle of investigation and reinvestigation, often via coronial inquests, to which many British Army soldiers have already been subject. Secondly, and I wonder whether many honourable members opposite are even aware of this, the same remedial order, which their whips will be urging them to vote for later this autumn, will also make it easier for Gerry Adams and his associates to sue the British government and ultimately the British taxpayer. This is two-tier justice at its absolute worst. Indeed, the veterans themselves have initiated a parliamentary petition entitled Protect Northern Ireland Veterans from Prosecution, which amassed over 100,000 signatures in well under a month. As of noon today, the petition has now achieved over 145,000 signatures, and it's still going strong. As a result of that public support, we will be debating this totally counterproductive policy, which is a looming disaster for armed forces recruitment and retention, in Parliament next month. On these Conservative benches, we will vigorously resist this wholly misguided remedial order, which is designed to aid Gerry Adams whilst throwing our brave veterans to the wolves. In that context, we warmly welcome the Daily Mail's campaign launched this morning to defend our veterans too. As the Mail's editorial this morning put it very powerfully, and I quote it, "It is profoundly unfair that frail ex-servicemen will continue to live in dread of a knock on the door by the authorities while IRA murderers sleep easily with letters of immunity handed to them by Tony Blair." I think that puts it rather well. It's worth recording in this context that very many of the soldiers who served in Northern Ireland were recruited from what we might now call Red Wall towns, from Blackburn to Bury and Bolton to Burnley, and were then ordered across the Irish Sea to help uphold the rule of law. Many of those surviving veterans are now in their 70s or even their 80s, and I suspect that many Labour MPs opposite would find it extremely difficult to explain to those veterans and their loved ones why they are taking this action just because their government is literally obsessed with the Human Rights Act 1998. So we on these benches will be bitterly opposing the remedial order, and I merely say that members opposite will need to look into their consciences and then hopefully, when the bells ring, do the same. With that very important exception, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I hope we can all agree across this House, those of us that are here, that we value immensely the work of the whole armed forces family and everything they do to help keep our country safe. Without those people who have the courage to take the king's shilling, as the old phrase has it, and to put on a uniform and, if ultimately necessary, to risk their lives in order to keep this country free, we would have no guarantee of our precious democracy. So perhaps the most fitting way to end this humble contribution would be to quote the words of Rudyard Kipling and his famous poem Recessional, which was written in 1897 to commemorate Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. For those who know the poem, there is no hint of jingoism about it. Indeed, quite the reverse. It warns about the power of divine judgment and the humility of kings. As Kipling put it, the tumult and the shouting dies. The captains and the kings depart. Still stands thine ancient sacrifice, a humble and a contrite heart. Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's an honour to speak today ahead of Armed Forces Day, a day not of pageantry, as the Honourable Gentleman from Mansfield just said, but also of principle. And I congratulate the government on, as it were, reinstating the pageantry as well, which is a good thing. And it's a day to recognise the men and women who both serve and have served in His Majesty's Armed Forces, the quiet professionals who carry the weight of our security, often in silence and too often without thanks. We owe them and their families, as we've heard, a debt of gratitude that we can't ever really pay. But gratitude alone is not enough. And as the Minister said, only a quarter of veterans really feel that their service is properly recognised. And there's a reason for that, and I'll speak plainly about it, and I hope the Minister will not take it as partisan. I hope he'll take what I have to say, in what were difficult 5 minutes of listening for him, as a call for action, a call for assistance, a call for help, if he likes. Because as my right honourable friend on the front bench said, there's a shadow that hangs over our armed forces, a political and legal vendetta targeting the veterans of Northern Ireland, of Operation Banner. These men answered their country's call at one of our country's darkest hours. Without hesitation, they stood between the innocent and the terrorists, often literally, often in the way of the bullet. And now, decades later, they're treated not as heroes, but as suspects. The frankly inadequately informed inquest over the SAS-IRA conflict at Clonard was just one incident in which elderly veterans are being persecuted, and there will be many more. We should never forget that terrorists killed 722 British soldiers during the Troubles. The people who carried out those murders have effectively been exonerated by the British state. I don't blame the state for that, it was necessary at the time. But today we witness a legal crusade against the men who risked everything in the service of peace. Now, this is not justice. It's an attempt to rewrite history. It's prosecution driven by politics, not facts. While the killers walk free, authorities hound the soldiers who stop them from killing and treat those soldiers like criminals. Now, the Legacy Act, forgive my shorthand, but the Legacy Act was designed to put an end to this travesty. And for its own reasons, the government has decided to repeal that act. But if it does, and this is important, but if it does not properly replace it with effective legislation, it will hand the initiative back to those who spent decades glorifying violence. And I hope the Minister will pay attention to every detail of that paragraph I've just said, if you do not replace it properly. The government must decide whose side they are on in this exercise. Our veterans, now in their 70s or even later, deserve peace in retirement, not a knock on the door and questions about battles that they fought to defend the public half a lifetime ago. Battles that were fought under orders. Battles that were fought under supervision. Battles that were fought under yellow card rules. And battles that immediately afterwards had close judicial examination of everybody's behaviour to ensure that they obeyed the law in every respect. And often the military police were involved in that. Looking back to the gentleman from Stockton, is it, who spoke earlier? And they weren't always popular in doing it, but it was a necessary part of the process. Not one of those conditions applied to the psychopathic murderers that they were up against. Not one. And I've repeatedly asked the government to end this shameful campaign of retrospective injustice. And I'll continue to ask until I get a meaningful answer and resolution to this running sore of injustice. That's why I support the petition that my right honourable friend referred to, the 145,000 signatures, an astonishing number for such a short time. But that is just the start. This is not just massively important to our veterans. If this rewriting of history succeeds, this weapon of lawfare can be used against soldiers in any future conflict, destroying the effectiveness of our troops in future operations. Now, this morning, the Daily Mail had a powerful headline starting the campaign to highlight this very problem. But we should remember, when we look at that headline, that this is not just about our special forces. It's about all of the armed forces. There are, I think, at least 20 inquests into actions by government agencies and forces that could potentially be restarted by the government after the end of the legacy legislation. Only a minority are about special forces. Most are about conventional forces or the RUC or the UDR. So if we continue down this path, we will not only betray our past, but will also jeopardise our future. This campaign of persecution sends a chilling message to the next generation. Serve your country, risk your life, and face prosecution in your old age. Yeah. Why would any young man or woman sign up for that? And the truth is, many will not. And I know the Minister referred to better recruitment and retention figures, but they won't last if this battle is lost by the British state. Now, this challenge has been most high profile when it struck at our elite units, SAS, SBS, the SRR, the DET as it was once known. But it applies to every rifleman, every soldier, every member of the military who carries or wields a weapon in defence of his country. Every single one. And these soldiers who operate in conditions of extreme danger and uncertainty are required to make impossible decisions at great speed whilst under fire, the terror of being under fire. And they expect neither recognition nor reward, but they do expect one thing, the support of their government. We expect our soldiers to put their lives on the line for our country, but why would they do that if their country will abandon them after their service? So instead they face doubt. Doubt that creeps into the field, into command, into mission planning. If soldiers must weigh every trigger pull against a future court case, we cripple their ability to act. So what is the point of armed forces if we render them useless through legal ambiguity? Now, I am the last person to tolerate unnecessary killing or misbehaviour by our troops. Those who are here will know of my campaigns on torture and rendition in the past, so I will not stand for that. However, we must balance properly the rule of law as it applies to each environment. We already have well thought through rules of lawfare established in the Geneva Convention, and that's where we must look first when conducting a war. Now, from 2005 to 2007, during their operations against Al-Qaeda in Iraq, our military achieved, along with the Americans, spectacular results in saving lives. And I reiterate that point, in saving lives. In Baghdad, vehicle-borne suicide bombings fell from 100 a month to just one after we engaged. Sectarian assassinations, once rife, all but ceased. Care of our military. But this was not the work of indiscriminate bombing or division-level assaults. It was achieved through precise, controlled and surgical raids, generally by elite forces, backed by careful planning into some of the most hostile environments. The impact was staggering. Even a hostile panorama program showed that 95% of terrorist neutralizations were captures, not kills. 95% under unbelievable circumstances. And of course, thousands of innocent lives were saved. This is not just a matter of operational skill, Minister, but also of moral discipline. In the midst of close quarters combat against some of the most dangerous men on earth, our forces showed a restraint few could match. I have no doubt that from time to time mistakes are made, and these, of course, should be answered for. But if we allow our opponents to use lawfare to destroy these capabilities, we are left with blunt instruments. Yeah. The bomb, the missile, the drone. So instead of capturing or killing just the guilty, we kill every innocent civilian on a bus or every guest at a wedding party. Our military has been brilliant at doing the opposite, at being targeted, lawful and effective. Dismantling that capacity will not only be militarily reckless, it will be betrayal of the very principles that the minister himself said we stand for, that should distinguish us from those who we fight. So let us today do rather more than clap politely at a parade. Let's act. Let's end the relentless hounding of our veterans. Let's give our serving forces the legal protection and political support that they deserve. Let us recognise that if we find it difficult to recruit, it's a consequence of a state that too often turns its back on its defenders. This Armed Forces Day, let us make one promise, that no British soldier will ever again be abandoned by the very nation they have so bravely protected.
Yeah. Kerith Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to pay tribute to our armed forces personnel, and can I also associate